Hello, is it working? Hold on, I can't see the chat right now. Yay! Is it live? Awesome. Yeah, I think it's live. Alright, so if I speak a bit weird, it's because there is a delay around 100 milliseconds because I have a bunch of plugins in this session and I'm hearing myself through my mic, which is a bit delayed, as you can see here, so it's a bit weird. So just telling you now. Hold on, I'm gonna make my camera a bit smaller because my face is not that interesting. Okay. All right, so in this stream, I'm just gonna go through this track here, and I'm gonna see what I did on every track, every channel. So I'm gonna explain a few things. If you have any questions during the stream, feel free to ask. I would be happy to answer any questions. But I'm gonna try to explain like why I did what on everything. So yeah, hopefully it will be interesting. First, I guess I'm just gonna play the mix just to test out that everything is working fine and it's not lagging or anything like that. And you can get an idea of the full track. So let's do it. Hold on, I'm getting some clicks. Wait a second. Let me try this again. Okay, it's good. All right. So yeah, I'm just gonna go from the left to the right, and let's just see everything. So actually, let's just go in the order of the events that happen through the track. So I guess the beginning would be vocals. It's a great song by Sybrid. So vocals, it's some loops, I think, probably like some library vocals, but there is just a huge reverb on them. So let's just see what's going on there. Yeah, so semi Q. Semi Q automation also. Yeah. So the beginning sample was a bit too sharp, so it's automated down in the treble. So it's darker. And this one's brighter. Okay, just kind of a detail stuff. Let's see if there is nothing there. So lots of these vocals are going through a bus with a huge reverb on it. This one also. This one actually is a bit different. It has a delay on it. A tape, just to change the treble texture a little bit. As you can see, the distortion is a bit up on this tape. Just kind of adding some tone and some ping pong delay, left, right, boom, 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 boom. Pretty wet, 52%. So it's just like huge and ambient. When you got these huge ambient things, don't be afraid to spam some reverb. Quite a lot of EQ here on this one. Just kind of important to get some air going on here. And this one was fine. So mostly just minor EQ tweaks on these vocals, and they're going through a bus. And on that bus, there is some magic, kind of, which is the doubler here. I love to use this on vocals because it makes the vocals much wider. So I'm gonna turn off the reverb first and just show you the doubler, which is going on all these vocal samples here, because it's a pretty big difference. So pay attention to the stereo field. So you kind of create this chorusing with the doubler, and then you put a huge reverb on it, and that's how you get that super big. So without the doubler, but the reverb. It's wide, but it's a bit narrower. With the doubler, it's like a bit wider. It's just a black hole. Yeah, sometimes my DAW freezes a bit, but that's just how it is. It's fine though. So just a very long reverb. Okay, so that's for the vocals. And it's kind of the same thing in the middle of the track. Same vocals. Sometimes I put a delay on some of them. For example, this one here has a delay here. You can kind of hear the left-right movement. Making sure I'm getting some air. So the more reverb you're gonna add, the darker it's typically going to be, because reverb, especially long reverbs, are typically rolled off. So if you still want to feel some air, you might have to boost it through the dry signal first. So when it comes to EQing this kind of samples, always EQ them through the reverb, because the reverb is such a huge part of the sound. It's going to massively change how the output sounds like. So you have to EQ the dry signal while you listen to the combination of the dry and the wet. So let's go back to the beginning of the track. So you got an idea, and I'm not gonna go into every single thing. This is not going to be like the most detailed mix deconstruction, but I will try to cover everything really well, just not for 3 hours. So yeah, you get the idea for the vocals. Sometimes a delay, EQ, doubler, reverb. That's kind of the idea here. I mean, yeah, the delay is just a stylistic choice. You don't have to. It would sound fine without just a reverb. With just the reverb is fine. I just like to put a delay because it makes some of these vocal samples a little bit more ethereal. And for this genre, it's actually fine to have this really ethereal sound. So I got some synth Brahms. Let's see this one here. A panning first. So pre-fader panning, because the thing is I have a reverb as an insert on this. So instead of panning with the panning knob on FL Studio and actually panning the reverb with it, because the panning here is post-fader, I decided to put a panning right first in the chain to kind of correct this and really center it. It was slightly off-center, so... Yeah, just nothing here. This plugin is just kind of adding air. Basically, this thing here, when you put it up, it kind of cuts the 1K and adds air. So the Bram by default didn't have enough high frequencies. So this plugin kind of helped creating these high frequencies, which is nice. So if I just turn it off. Yeah, a bit more of that air here. That's nice. Just subtle EQing. Hold on, subtle. No, not subtle. So without. So, I mean, the treble was rolled off by default, so even though that looks like a huge peak, all it's doing really is just adding a slightly more treble, even though it looks huge. Because by default, the sound was already very rolled off. So I'm just cutting here to avoid that noise buildup in the very high end. And I just kind of fine-tuning the color of the treble and the high mids. So by default, there was kind of a resonance here, and it was rolling off, so I wanted more of the crispiness and just less of that 3K. So to get kind of more even, flat high mids and treble. You can hear how it's kind of rolled off by default, so yeah. Evening out the frequency response of this sound a bit. Then just a room on it. So let's see without the room. So first, let me turn off the whole reverb so you can get an idea. Okay, so by default, this sound had something mono about it. It felt kind of centered, not that big. So if I put a room on it, instantly I'm getting more stereo-ness, even though I'm not getting much tail. And after the room, I put a hole, and thanks to the hole, I'm getting that really long sound. Again, I'm filtering my reverbs. All my whole reverbs, I don't want any sub. Okay. Let's see this synth. Okay. Let's start with this one. Yeah, throughout the track, this one is pretty simple. So by default, it was kind of muddy, so I did this. Pretty big difference, right? And then again, the room into hall trick. So room first. Gives more stereoness. Thanks to the early reflections, more stereoness. Boom, into hall. It's being sent to the hall, as you can see here on this fader. This knob, whatever. So it gives a great space and yeah, control of the low mids here, which is pretty useful because there is a bunch of low mids going on from other places. So, and this second pulse here, which starts in the intro. I mean, yeah. It's more like these decisions, it's a lot because of contrast. So for example, at the beginning of this track, this track is kind of a matter of contrast. You got the contrast between the big heavy parts with these metal drums, bass, and then you got these lighter parts with the synth. So it's more about having the lighter parts not having massive low mids, and then when you got the metal parts going on, it's like more of a contrast. So I don't necessarily want huge low mids on these intro things. That's kind of the idea behind it. And by default, either way, it was too muddy. So I would have cut anyway. But the reason I made them much thinner and much brighter is also because of this, because of the contrast. So just by default, because the sound is just better if I filter it, and also because of this contrast between the heavy parts and the lighter parts. Wait, did I turn on the reverb? Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. So the second pulse. The second pulse is a bit more complicated because it starts very light here. Actually, let's look at it. It's better if I just show you the tracks. Okay, so this big pulse is kind of light here. And then it's pretty different here. And then there is a sub bass here. Hey, Sybrid. Okay, so let's see this synth here. This one has a lot of processing. So I had to make sure that the processing would work in all places, even though that bass is just so different in the middle compared to the beginning. So there is a bunch of automations on there to make sure that the processing fits the different textures that are going on within this stem. So for the intro, here you can see the automations here. There is, I will talk about this one and this one, but first let's listen to what's going on all the time. So nothing here. And then I got a transient enhancer. So this is kind of adding slappiness to the mids, the high mids, because by default it was a little bit flat. I'm actually going to disable everything and just go one by one on all of these plugins here. So pay attention to the high mids. So I don't know if you can hear, but you got some kind of transient going on, like ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. So it adds kind of a random, not so random, but Slappiness, yeah, exactly. More percussiveness, so that's nice. It's quite a lot of it. So that's cool. Makes it a bit less linear, less boring. And then, so by default, that bass, as you can hear, since I have all the plugins off here, mostly, the bass is kind of flat, right? It's like, you can hear there's individual notes being played like dun, 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 but it's still kind of flat, so it wouldn't just work. I mean, I couldn't just add compression and make it pop. And I wanted every bass hit to kind of pop like a little kick. So what I first did is that I squashed it even more to make it very consistent. It might seem counterintuitive because I'm doing exactly the opposite right now. I'm making it even more flat. So controlling low mids a bit, but flattening it even more. But after this, I'm creating punch. Wait. I'm creating punch with a click track. So I got this click track here, which is invisible. Inaudible. But you can see it's like ding, 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 and that's doing some multiband transient expansion to the flat bass. So now that the bass was consistent because of the previous multiband, this multiband here is creating attack with expansion. It's just like my mixtape number 6, but on the bass. So now you can feel wah, 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 wah. Off. Pay attention when I turn this on. So that was pretty much the only way to get some defined punch into this sound, because by default it was just too flat. So no way I could create punch in any other way. So after that, distortion. So this distortion is going to be automated. For most of the bass, I'm not using it. And it's being turned on here, right here at this point. I know it sounds like that, but that's where context matters, because in the track, I swear it's not bad. But right here, it does sound like farts. I get it, but you will see. And after that, just some fine tuning, kind of compressing this. This is just fine tuning, and then more fine tuning. Yeah, okay, more fine tuning. Yeah, more fine tuning. Room. I'm not gonna explain every time I put a room on something, because I put rooms on everything. You can hear how it changes the ambience, right? It seems like everything is a bit more in the back. Since it's kind of a syncopated synth, I'm not gonna put a whole reverb on this. I wanna keep the definition. So I just want to have the distance going on with the room. I don't want a whole, because I just wanna keep that definition. And then again, this gain is just kind of turning down this bass at the beginning, because the beginning of the middle part is a bit more tame. Slowly bringing it up here. And then the distortion kicks in here, but as you can see, since there is other stuff on top of it, it's just slightly gritty, and actually you wouldn't really notice it. And it adds like a weird color, and this track is kind of weird in a good way, so why not having this kind of hardcore contrast between the uplifting vocals and the bass, you know? Sometimes you want to be a bit edgy in your mixing. So that's kind of a spot where you could do that, basically. And yeah, so let's see next. I'm gonna go back to the beginning of the track here and see what sounds come next. I'm just gonna go like that. So why don't we check the strings next? Let's see about the strings. In this track, it's mostly just ensemble tracks, I think. So let's see. So yeah, 2 ensemble tracks. So they were kind of panned pretty nice by default, so I didn't really mess with that too much. And since there is like cello and violins and like several instruments in the same stem, I didn't really mess too much with the panning because otherwise I would just be panning everything. So if you got several instruments in the same stem, just leave it center because it's pre-panned and you don't want to mess up everything. So no, the strings are actually pretty cool, but not very defined by default. A little bit too roomy. I wanted more percussiveness. So let's see. So these 2 string tracks here are routed to the strings bus, which is sent to a strings. Actually, it's the brass reverb, but it's just like a whole setup. So that's just adding some room. And it's sent about 60%. So on the strings bus, I got some air EQ and high-end boosts here. So if I just bypass these EQs, just treble boosts. Yeah. Then slight tuning, rolling off any rumble. But now, so what's interesting about these strings is that there is this sidechain going on. So because they were a little bit too blurred and lacked some percussiveness, I did the same trick as I did on the synth. I put a click track. I put actually 2 click tracks here. And these guys are triggering, they're kind of triggering, let me see. Yeah, they're triggering a multi-band compressor, which is going to give punch to the individual tracks. So I got this low strings tracks here, which is doing like dun 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 dun. And this click track is going to add punch to it. Boom, boom, boom. You can hear the extra punch, and that's because of the multiband here. So in the bass, but also in the mids. So expansion, sidechain, multiband expansion. To create the click tracks, you just put a bunch of 808s, hi-hats, like that. And that's going to trigger the multibands with external sidechain. So actually, yeah, so the one for the low strings is here. I rarely do that. But if you got just like one strings track and that's what you have to work with, if you want to kind of change the articulation or whatever, it can sound good to do it this way. You know, it's kind of experimental. Like ideally you would get like a bunch of really percussive staccato tracks, but sometimes when you layer a bunch of strings, they can lose some impact. They can have a nice roomy tone by layering them, but if you combine a bunch of libraries, you can lose some of the percussiveness even from staccatos. So it can be a good way to bring it back. And so for the other strings track, it's the same concept, just it's not 8th notes, it's like 16th note. So it's a different click track that's faster. The click track is going like da 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 da. Hold on, I need to activate it. All right, so that's the idea between these strings, the click tracks here. Then, yeah, so on the individual strings track, I also got some EQ going on. So I got my high boosting going on in the bus, and in the individual stuff, I got more EQ. So for these high strings, so this track is not so much about the strings, you know, it's like a metal track. So it's just the strings had to be very percussive, very airy, not trying to make the most organic sounding strings here. Which is fine for this track. So playing with the mids. A bit of dynamic EQ, as you can see. I love to have a combination of dynamic EQ to tune the random resonances and main EQ that doesn't move around, just to fix the general tonal inconsistencies of a sound. It's really useful. So I got some gain going on. I think it's just because this is like an ensemble track. So I wanted to automate some parts a little bit differently. Let's see, actually. Yeah, as you can see, I'm just boosting a little bit some of these string tracks for the intro because it's a pretty important part. So these low strings, you can see all these muddy resonances. So the processing is kind of extreme on these strings. It's not the most organic sound ever, but that's because it's a hybrid metal track. So yeah, overall, just getting that sharp, controlled sound and more percussive than default. So no processing is like that. Yeah, it's really, really processed. But it's fine though, because there is a bunch of drums to fill the mid-range as well. I also have actually an EQ automation on this. I think it's, yeah. Yeah, as you can see, I scooped the strings more for the staccatos, because after that it goes into sustain. And actually, yeah, it's just for this. Just for that rise. I wanted that rise to not be so scoped, I guess. Oh, and on the other strings tracks, there is also EQ automation. Probably just cutting more mids for the staccatos. Let me see. Yeah. Yeah, just to get the staccatos very clear and just bring in more low mids for the sustain part. Okay. So yeah. Let's see. That's for the strings. That's the two main string tracks. It's pretty minimalistic here when it comes to the stems. There is more strings, but it's for the middle part. It's like some very short stuff. So that's the main strings here. Oh, that's loud. So let's get into the other tracks. Let's see. I boosted highs in the bass. Like here. A lot. So, the brass. Let's see with the brass. So, there is two main tracks. Actually, three main tracks. Yeah. So the horn, the main horn here, got an EQ on it, controlling the low fundamental, boosting highs a bit. So the horn, because of the room, can go like, so I'm controlling the low fundamental to get a very thick sound. And then I got some low brass going on. So this is panned a bit to the left. Yeah, it looks pretty extreme, right? But if you turn it off. So low brass tends to have too much mids, but that was kind of an extreme case. So trying to get some low harmonic from the low brass, cutting some of these very muddy mids, controlling a bit of the high mids here with dynamic EQ. So keep in mind, in this track, there is guitars as well. It's a hybrid track, so I have to create some room for that mid-range of the guitars. So if I just have too much high mids and stuff from the brass and just mids in general, it's going to be too much mids. So by having this kind of bright but slightly scooped brass, overall, I'm creating more room for the guitars and whatever's in the middle. And these two tracks are going to the brass bus, which has an EQ on it. So this EQ is just boosting highs. And then, so the brass bus is sending to the brass hole about 70%. But I'm putting the brass through room first. As you can see, without the room, the brass sounds pretty direct. With the room, it puts it in the back in a different dimension. It's subtle, but it gives some stereoness because of the extra early reflections. So once I have that, I just send it to the hole and it puts it in the right space. So So that's the two main brass tracks. So I also got some staccato horns. This is kind of low in volume, but it's there. It's also going to the same bass, the same brass bass. So removing some of these frequencies here. There is a bunch of guitars in this track, so yeah. If I can get the bite of the horns, that's great, but not so much of that 2K, 3K, because that's mostly dominated by the guitars, and you will see later when I play the guitars. And so that's the three kind of natural brass, I can't speak, the three natural brass tracks. With the reverb, it's pretty nice. And then I got some crazy, crazy sounds here. So this is just kind of a hybrid, mostly synth, kind of Bram type of brass. So I just rotated it to the same brass bus to kind of treat it the same way in the same space. Actually, no, I didn't. I didn't route it to the brass bus. Never mind. It's completely different. It's independent. Let's see. Let's see what I do. Nothing there. Just an EQ at the beginning here. Okay, so just kind of flattening the bass, making sure it's compressed and consistent here. Cutting some of the mid-range for the horns mostly, just making sure there is no like muddy room tone in there. And boosting some of the highs here. And then I have a distortion on it, but the distortion is just for the end. So yeah, just to make the end a bit more epic, I crunched up the last moments of this sound here. That's way too over the top for the main track, so it's just really for the very ending. And there is some sidechaining going on, but that's triggered by the drums, so we'll see that later. Okay, and there is also ambient horn. I think that's in the middle part. Okay, that's just kind of a middle brass thing. So you don't hear it, but see how much it's fighting to keep that consistency and smoothness. That's because naturally ensemble instruments tend to have some wobbliness going on. So if you want a very stable sound and smooth sound for some of these acoustic ensembles, you do have to compress them quite a bit. So in that case, quite a lot. So mostly just fast attack, fast release. That's what Pro Q3 is doing by default. It's making sure that the sound is not wobbly and it's a very smooth linear sound, which is what I want here in the 500 Hertz. And that harmonic here was poking out particularly strongly, so I made another band just to notch it out. It has some kind of long reverb, but that's actually built in. I didn't add that at the end here. So yeah. And there's one more thing. Actually, no. No, that's all the brass. I did show all the brass already. So that's pretty much all the brass. So as you can see, I'm mixing the synth brass a bit differently. But yeah, in general, the main acoustic brass is going through the same bus and getting that room treatment and hall treatment. Hey Franco, what's up? All right. Next. So I did the strings, I did the brass. I think next comes the guitars then. Let's see. Okay. So guitars. Yeah, guitars just recorded by Sybrid. Yeah, it will be on my channel. So when you got double tracked guitars, you pan them left and right, so that's pretty standard. Panning them, putting them in a bus. Nah, this EQ is not doing anything. I got an EQ on one of the guitars for some reason, but okay. And once I got my guitars in the bus here, okay, just fine-tuning the tone of the guitars. So cutting the low end because that's gonna be the bass guitar in that range, so not having them fight. And just kind of getting rid of this jarring kind of tone here. And getting more high ends because I like guitars to be bright. So without the EQ. Like honestly, if these guitars were in a metal track and they were all you could hear, I might just want them darker. But since it's kind of blending with the rest, and you got so much mid-range building up, I felt like you still got some brass high mids here. So I wanted the guitars to be brighter in the context of everything. But the tone of guitars is kind of a personal thing, so yeah. I got a room, but it's turned off, and maybe I'm turning it on at some point. Let me see. Otherwise, there is no reverb on these guitars. Okay, yeah, I must be turning on the room somewhere. Am I? Hold on. Just... Okay, no, this room I'm not using. Maybe I tried it out and I just turned it off at some point. So yeah, no reverb on the guitars. It's generally not a good idea. So... yeah, that's all the guitars here. Nothing here. All right. And the bass guitar just kind of complements the low end of these guitars here. So if I just put the bass as well. So that's kind of filling up the low end hole. So bass, he called it bass guitar fake. So I'm guessing it's a VST bass. Or maybe not, maybe it's just his guitar which he pitched down, probably. I'm not sure. It sounds a bit too real actually. Either way, it's basically a bass guitar. So there was these very sharp transients by default, which are just a bit too distracting. So the first thing I did is limiting. There is still some of them, but yeah, I'm just kind of avoiding this extra slappiness, which was a bit too much by default. Yeah, see, that one way too clicky. So I'm helping a little bit by limiting some of these peaks. It's not doing like, I'm not like crushing it, but it's doing a little bit. Just cutting a bit of bass, but not too much. Because the way I'm gonna create clarity between the bass and the kick is going to be with sidechaining, so I don't need to cut a whole lot. I can't speak. It's because I'm hearing myself in my headphones. That's why I can't speak, by the way. It's distracting when you hear yourself 100 milliseconds after you speak. But yeah, so just filtering a bit of bass, but not too much because I'm gonna create clarity with sidechaining later on between the kick and the bass. All right. After this bass guitar, after this EQ, I put a reverb on the sub bass. Yeah, it's just a short room, but basically it's putting the bass in space, even though it's a very short space. So see the difference here? So if you use a small room, it's probably not gonna mess up the phase of the bass completely. And it's generally fine. So when you put reverb on the bass, just make sure you check the phase correlation, because if you convert the track to mono, it's bad if the bass disappears or just phases badly. But I did check that in mono, it sounds fine. No problems at all from this. So that's good. And I'm getting that extra roominess in the mids and the highs of the bass guitar, which just gives more space overall. So I like to use a room and bass. It just sounds more alive, you know. Otherwise, it just sounds dead. So after that, just compressing the bass even more. So that's partly to kind of compensate for the inconsistencies of the room, because I put a room before it. So the room could make some notes, some frequencies resonate. But actually, it's pretty stable, so that's not really needed. It's just to kind of control the low end even more, but it's not completely needed. It's not really moving. But it's making sure the bass is very solid. And then that's what's going to control the sidechaining. I will check that later. Right, so guitars and bass. Right. Ooh, feels weird to hear some treble after hearing so much bass. All right, so let me check the leads. There is a lead guitar as well. Okay. So at the end of the track, I got a synth lead going on here. It's like a guitar synth lead, so let's see. I just send it to my reverb here. So by default, it's pretty noisy, so I cut the noise here. So the only reason I cut so much high mids is because there is already horns taking care of the high mids. There is already so much taking care of the high mids. This is just like very low in the mix, kind of like an extra layer. So I don't want this to be very noisy and like intrusive. It's just kind of a subtle layer which I'm pushing under the mix. So that's why it's processed to be kind of gentle and not too aggressive. It's just there to add a little extra. You can't even hear it that much, right? So, right? And then there is some guitar effects. which I had to cut from the rhythm tracks and put them here, and I process them differently, so separately. So they are just both of these effects here. They are sent to a bus here. So the kind of high dive bomb is being sent to a delay here, and that delay is being sent to the reverb. So I'm having a reverb delay going on for the dive bombs here. You can hear the ping pong delay slightly. So just sending the bus to this, and this is sent into this reverb. So it's a 100% wet delay. And then I got these effects here, these stutter effects. These are just being sent to reverb, simply just a reverb. By default, I just had the same kind of pitch for both of the things, but I created a dissonance. So this sound here on the top is like this, and this one here is very dissonant. So what I did with this sound, the bottom one, is that I kind of used the modulator in FL. Let me see if I can find the... Yeah. See, in FL, you got this thing here in the track panel. The RM, so it's like RMs into this. So I just messed a bit with the RM, and it kind of messed up the sound in that way. So when I combine the original plus the weird sound, so the original is like that. Right, this delay is not supposed to be there, but... So the original here, plus this, which I messed up with, it creates something a bit more scary, right, than just having this. So that's me. By default, it was just like that. So that's kind of cool, I guess. So, small thing. And then, so that's for the guitars. I guess we did all the guitars here. Yeah, as you can see on the rhythm guitars, I have no reverbs. On the leads, I have reverbs because it's a different thing, right? The rhythm, you want them to stay clear. They're already very distorted, so you don't want to kind of blur them even more. Distorted heavy guitars are already very distorted and very flat sounding. So putting reverb doesn't really help with the wall of guitars. It just kind of blurs the wall of guitars. So if you want to keep the crispiness, you don't really want to reverb them. But for leads, it's different because the leads, you want to get more width. And guitars are mono by default in many cases. So reverb just helps with leads feeling more like they're in a space. But with rhythm guitars, you already got the space from the panning, left and right. So reverb is not really going to add more space. It's just kind of going to soften the texture, which is not a good thing. So then risers. This is just a huge track with risers. So let's see. I really didn't mess with this too much. Pretty simple. Cut a bunch of mids in these risers, because there is already so many mids in this track. So just sending them to reverb here, quite wet. All right, and then some random synth effects. So I got some distortion automation going on for this. because some of these I wanted distorted, some of these not. So at the beginning, I got no distortion, as you can see here. So these Brahms here were kind of already distorted, so yeah. Just got this going on. Getting some of the muddy mids. And then some, that's going to be sidechaining actually, so I will go back to that later. And as you can see, some of the downers here were not distorted by default. So I enabled the devil lock here. As you can see, it's very dark by default, no distortion. So that just gives the tone. The thing is, when you solo an instrument with distortion, it feels like it's very transformed, but in the mix, you hear the mids from distortion a lot less. So in the mix, it actually doesn't sound that bright, even though it sounds pretty bright when you solo it. It's always the case for distortion. See here? You can barely hear it. And if I didn't have this distortion, you wouldn't hear it at all. That's for sure. So, but thanks to the distortion, you do hear the slight movement of the downer. So it helps kind of grabbing your attention to have these higher harmonics here, thanks to the distortion. All right, so same thing here. And for the ending, yeah, the sounds and the ending are just completely different and already distorted. So I just kind of left them how they were. Just got a gain here to raise them at the end. All right, it's pretty simple. And just some EQ automation to fine tune some of these final effects. Yeah, all right. And every time it's kind of compressing the low end. I'm not like lacking low end. There is a lot of sub. It's just making it more consistent, which I like to do with these kinds of effects. Like it's not like we're really looking for dynamics in the sub here. We don't really need dynamics. We need this to be solid. So that's what it is. So I guess after that, that's all the synth. Did we already do all the synth? I guess so. Yeah. So there is only drums left. Yeah, there is a bunch of automations. We can check them out at the end. But yeah. Let's pay attention to the drums, I guess. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Hold on, guys. I'm just gonna get a glass of water. Be right back. Okay. So, by the way, if you guys have any questions, I do watch the chat. So, oh man, I like these drums. They just bring a smile to my face for some reason. Oh yeah, there's also a stack choir, which we will see at the end. I missed it in the vocals part here. So yeah, don't worry, I will go through all the stuff for the drums. So first we start with the more classic epic drums. Several layers. As you can see. So there is just this metal kick here, just hitting these 3 hits here. Then there is the main low end here, which is just a metal tom, actually. And then we got some mid-range. So the mid-range kind of starts to introduce some room, which introduces bigness to the drums, right? We got the low end tightness from the toms, we got the tightness. So we're kind of introducing some bigness now, some reverb from the mid-range and the highs. And even more here with this. Right? And there is even a hit here. Kind of mid-range long thing. So all of my kind of reverb layers are not that bassy, as you can hear. All the clean low end is coming from this. So filtering is important for drums. Okay, so let's see all of these layers. So the first one here. And this is just... Okay, so this is not doing much at the beginning. But it's doing a bit more after. And just a ton of reverb on this, so nothing here. Okay, G stereo, so this kind of narrowing the lows a bit, because by default the lows were a bit wide, so slightly narrowing the lows below 200. The only reason I did that is because the low end feels very kind of loose, right? Like almost out of phase a bit, so I usually wouldn't narrow drums, but it just feels a bit more natural this way, so it's subtle. And then, so I'm cutting the lowest sub here, but I'm still allowing some of it because it gives some size, and it's not like this drum is very loud either way, so there is plenty of room for the other drums. So sure, I'm filtering it. You can see before the filter there was a bunch of 40 Hz. I don't want that. That's going to conflict with everything else. But I'm also not cutting at 200. That's a mistake. If you cut too high, you start to just make stuff very like too separated, and you will hear it. If it's too filtered, it will feel disconnected and not good. So kind of cutting a resonance here. So without the EQ. With. Sure, it sounds a bit smaller, but it's cleaner and there are several layers. So I'm gonna get some of the bigness from other layers. So that's why you have to filter stuff, because you don't want to rely on just this one layer. G-Stereo, it's actually free. G-Gain, G-Stereo, it's a suite of free plugins. You can check it out, it's great. G-Gain, maybe type G-Gain, it's the most famous one. And then you got G-Stereo in the same website. So next layer. So this layer is kind of, it was already wet. So lots of drum libraries like Strikeforce, etc. are already wet. So I'm not putting any more reverb on this. It's fine like that. Right, next layer. Same kind of category of sounds. As you can see, it had some sub here. Cut all of it, because I'm getting it from other sounds. If you want some tight drums, you have to pick the low end wisely, and just from like 1 or 2 samples. Just have maybe 1 or 2 samples max, just take care of all the low end when it comes to drums. So I'm putting a plate reverb. So because that drum was a bit too dry, actually, I kind of want to put it in the same space as the other drum. So I like these big, wet, high drums. So without the plate. It just didn't blend with the other one. So now it blends more with the other one together. It's some super wet sounds, but it's just mid-range and high, so it's fine. As long as you get the punchy bass, you can make the drums wet. It's a lot of reverb. Sometimes, I mean often, I would send 100% wet to a plate or something. So, so next layer in the intro, that kick here. This one. So that kick is actually going to be the main, one of the 2 main kicks which hit in the climax. So in the climax, I have 2 kicks. I have a main one here. Wait. I have this one here. Yeah. And then there is that other kick here. Which is the one we're checking out right now. So it's just kind of a metal kick. Already pre-processed by a library, so no need to do too much processing. Just wanted to hear it more through the mix, so I tuned that EQ while listening through the mix to see how the high end of the kick just responded to the mix. So it might sound bright solos, but in the mix, that's what you need to actually hear it through the rest of the stuff. And then SSL EQ, just more high end. So by default, treble boost. Okay. Nothing here. So yeah, it's just for the kick. It's already a compressed kick. So didn't need to compress it more. As you can see, it's already like super squashed by the library. You can even see it in the waveform here. It's fine. So that's going to be one of the main two kicks, as I said before. And after that, let's check the other kick while we're at it. So we got the big smash here, which is the main kind of drum. So there is two layers to this one. By default, I had the choice because I had this one layer here. I'm gonna up my voice a bit, so feel free to lower your sound because that's a bit loud. So there is two things. There is this big smash sound, and there is also this sound here. Oh wait, not this one, this one. And as you can see, both of these sounds are routed to the mega smash bus, so this red stuff here. So I got this channel and this channel, these two here, hitting at the same time. So to get a tight low end, I needed to choose which one was gonna be the main. So that the big smash here by default was a bit tighter, so I chose that as the main sub hit. And the rise and hit here, which was also nice, but a bit less. As you can see, by default, it was like that with no plugins. See, you could hear that and be tempted to use this as your main sub, right? But it was just a bit too long of a sub, and the style of the track is kind of a bit metal. So you want that kind of fast kick snare interaction. So it just wasn't the best, especially since there is like a mix of this big smash and the Mjolnir kick here, this one. So to get a more consistent experience, I just felt like the big smash had the tighter low end out of the both options. This one here. So that's the one I chose for my low end in the end. So what I did to that other layer is that I just filtered it a lot, as you can see. So now it's not fighting anymore with my big smash. I also limited it. So by default, I got so much transient from the other layer that I felt like this layer should be more like a reverb layer. So by using a limiter, I'm just flattening any kind of brutal attack, making sure it's more like a smooth decay layer. So it's just making the hits last longer in the highs, basically. And I got all the punch from the other one. Right, short high punch, flat reverb punch. I mean, not punch. In combination of both. This one was alone here, but yeah. And so on that rise and hit, at the end I got plate as well. So because that high layer is mostly just there for the reverb, just made it more roomy thanks to this plate here. So without plate. Right. Just making the oh, it's quite wet, as you can see. There is even more reverb signal than there is dry signal. So, and on the big layer here, okay, so there is a sidechain multiband. That's to give more punch. So it's the same concept as I explained before on the basses, if you're there from the beginning of the stream. So basically I have a click track going. Where is it? If I can show you. Yeah, okay, this one here. And that click track is going to be on every single big hit. And it's going to redefine the low end of the big smash. Let me see. Okay, it's that track here, Smash Trigger. Okay. Okay, that one is a good example here. So pay attention to the punch. So it gives an extra sub bump, which makes that big smash feel more like a metal kick. In terms of the quality of the low end, it brings up the attack of the low end. The front part of the low end makes it feel more like a metal kick in terms of punch, and less like a low boom. So because of that, it feels more metal and blends more on the track in a better way. Nothing here, and after that, just kind of fine tuning the frequency. You can hear the boxiness here. Right? I got a reverb as well. Oh yeah. Pretty big difference. Plate, Valhalla plate. Pretty long decay. I guess it's a 3-second decay. And yeah, just bringing more sustain. As usual, I'm filtering the reverb. I'm cutting the lows from the reverb, so the reverb is not affecting the tightness of the bass, which I created here with the multiband. So the reverb is just there to extend the mids and the highs. All right. And that's for these big hits. Then I got a reverb kick. I think it's mostly just like an ambience thing. Let's see. Yeah. So it's kind of in between the hits. No bass on this. It's not interfering. Okay, nothing here. Just an patcher. A PSP easy verb. So that reverb is great. It's like a plate again. It makes the hit here, you can hear. It makes the hits blend better. So right, so that's for the big hits here. Next, I'm gonna do the snare last because it's my favorite. So let's see the crashes here. There is 2 crash tracks. So on the crash, it was a bit thin, like the attack of the cymbal. So I just limited it. If something feels too small and thin, it can be 2 reasons. You got too much transient treble when it comes to the drums. Or, wait. Okay, 1, you got too much treble by default. So it just feels too close because if something is kind of far away and big, it would have less immediate kind of 15K and above. So number 1 thing you could do is try to roll off the treble to make something more far away. And number 2 is you got too much transient, too much attack, and that can make something feel close as well. So if you want more roominess out of something, and reverb is not enough because you still feel that proximity even though you put reverb. Then you can also flatten the high end with a limiter, and it's just gonna put it in more in the back, basically. So it's kind of subtle, but if I make the effect extreme here, see how it's kind of destroying the attack? So you get less of that immediate attack, which puts things pretty close. It was, yeah, here. So yeah, just kind of tweaking the attack here, frequencies a bit, and a lot of reverb. Okay. And then, let me see. I think there is a second crash track. I want to find it. Yeah, the cymbals here. So okay, so I got a buzz going on with the cymbals. Because I think, yeah, there is 2 more cymbal layers actually. So I put one left and one right. It's a different library. So there is this one here. It's getting a bit some muddy. Okay. On the right, got another one. So before I panned this one right, I had to invert the channels because both of these tracks have some stuff on the left and the right. It kind of alternates, but this track was mostly hitting on the left. Both of them are mostly hitting on the left. So I inverted the channels. Just inverting the stereo channels, of course, before I did the panning here, but I inverted the stereo channels just to make sure that this one is mostly hitting on the right, even though this track is kind of varied, like some of the left, some on the right. But at least most of these are hitting on the right, most of these are hitting on the left. And after that, they also panned a bit, which gives that width. And the bus, there is more processing. Nothing here. And yeah, there is a gain also on the bus to, I guess I'm automating the cymbals a bit. Yeah, cymbals. It's just in the intro I'm lowering them, I guess. Yeah, and then in the main parts they're very loud, but well, like 1 dB louder or something. It's still a small change. All right, so now let's get to the interesting part, which is the snare. There is several layers in the snare, actually. Oh yeah, before I go to the snare, I just want to show you the big smashes. The one I showed you before with the red bus here. There is a bunch of automation here on this track. And that's because all of these hits are slightly different. And also what's going on in the track is slightly different. So the track is a little bit more intense. In the final part, there is more instruments. So the big smash needs to go up as well, because in lots of cases, when you got some samples, it's the same samples all the way through, right? It's not louder here than it is here by default. So if you got more stuff, especially more sustained stuff going on in the track towards the end, then you also have to raise the drums because they're not going to raise themselves by default. Otherwise, you will get just louder sustained stuff and the same level all the way through of drums, and you will end up with weak sounding drums. So you have to make sure that they stay at the same level, like kind of the drums in relation to the sustained elements, so that you don't get kind of an imbalance between the parts. So because that final metal part is just more dense, there is just more stuff, I'm making sure that the drums are a bit higher in general. Here, here, here. These big smashes were already loud by default. But let me actually show you in context. So as you can see, there is massive horns here, much louder sustained stuff. So if I didn't do that boost here, the hit would actually sound weak. So if you pay attention, if I disable this automation here, so pay attention to the impact of the low hits at these specific points. That's fine. It's fine, but it's not too fat here, right? Now if I do it. Yeah, it's not a huge difference, but it's there. So you got that extra like 1.5, 2 dB of punch, so that the punch stays at the right level compared to the sustained elements. That's very important. So you have to kind of tune this while you listen to what's going on in the track, because it really depends on what's going on in the sustained elements. Yeah, for the metal kick here, did I do some of this as well? Okay, not so much, because as you can see, the metal kick is not playing in the beginning of the climax. It's just playing when it's loud with the horns here. So because of that, it's only playing in the loudest parts, so I don't need to automate because I can already set it to the right level for this part. So it was mostly fine. But the other one, not really, because it's playing everywhere, also in the weaker sounding parts. Here, for example. So yeah, that's for the kicks automation. It's actually huge. Like your big drums, you need to automate them to the level of the sustained elements. That it's really huge. So the snare. Let's see the snare. So I got this layer, this layer, this layer. Okay. I think that's all. Oh, sorry, I missed one. I was like, that's too thin. Yeah, okay. Wait, did I miss something? Hold on, hold on, hold on. No, actually, that's right. Okay. Maybe I should color code the stuff better. Hold on, I'm just gonna make the snare a different color so we can figure out, like, otherwise it's just... Yeah, because I know where the stuff is mostly, but it's gonna be more difficult for you to know where it is. So that's the snares, and that's the snare bus. The snare bus, and that's the 3 snare layers. So what's on this snare? The first one here was very wet by default. So if I just turn off all the plugins. So it has a cool attack, it has a cool texture, but it was too long, not tight enough for this track. So what I did is first, I took a tiny bit of transient off because I'm gonna get the transient from other layers of the snares. And that's going to be kind of more of a sustain snare. And then I put a gate. So this gate is going to cut the attack, the release. So compare without it. Yeah, I'm cutting pretty much all the tail just to get a more normal kind of snare. So I'm still keeping a lot of texture and some bigness of the sound, but just not having that ridiculous tail, which wouldn't fit in the context. Nothing here, and then just an EQ. So kind of removing some of that mid-range, mid-range. I'm not cutting the low ends here because in this snare there is actually some punch going on there. Even if it's kind of a noisy punch, it's still a punch, and it's already clean anyway thanks to the gate. It's not like there is a long sub decay or whatever, so I'm keeping some of the low mids here. And then I got another layer here. Okay, this one is very low in the mix. It's like the layer that's kind of designed to add a natural sound to the snare. Just getting a bit of mud, but nothing crazy. It's not where the energy is coming from. As you can see, barely any processing on it. And then I got this snare here. Which is... There's nothing on this EQ. But that layer is kind of going to give... actually, there is nothing on the individual... Whoa, I really didn't do any processing on this? That's crazy. Maybe I didn't. I guess I did the processing in the snare bus afterwards, but okay. Yeah, so I got these 3 layers. This one kind of more round and low end-ish, just kind of having the strong fundamental harmonic. This one for the kind of reverb and kind of high impact. And this one a bit more natural. So the 3 of them together through the bus here, it makes a pretty nice sound. So once I got a pretty nice balance of the 3 layers, I just went and processed them. So that's on the bus. Let me disable everything. So first of all, I got a compressor with a long attack and a fast release. So long attack is gonna create some punch. So if I just turn it off, it's not compressing much, but if I just make the effect more obvious, actually. Okay, that's more obvious. You can see that this setting is a long enough attack that it's leaving some sustain. It's leaving some punch. It's not like crushing the snare. It's leaving that snap. So it's just kind of enhancing the snap a bit, even though I'm not doing much. Okay, that's for that. And then EQ. Just making it a bit more, yeah, just a bit less mid-range. Then saturation, so it gives more texture to the sound. So without it, it's subtle, but it gives a bit more sustain to the sound. Then patcher, so that's a plate reverb. Pretty cool. And then Pro MB, and that's going to that's going to create more punch in the sound. So basically, I felt like it wasn't really punchy enough in the low end, so I centered this bend around the fundamental of the snare. So like 200 hertz would be here, and then a bit of the lows here. Hey, what's up? Yeah, and basically this band is listening to the high treble. So it's internal sidechain, it's listening to the high treble. So it's detecting whenever there is a snare hit, and it's adding punch thanks to a fast attack and fast release as well. It's adding punch with expansion to that layer here. So by itself, the snare might sound like it has too much highs, but again, the context is extremely important with any mix. So because there is so much masking going on in the highs with the guitars and stuff, in the context of the mix, the snare feels much woodier and warmer than when it's soloed. So if I just play in the mix, right, it feels like there is a lot less highs. But when it's soloed, you hear the a lot more. But actually, you need it because in context of the mix, the high frequencies help perceiving the snare better. But because there is masking going on with other instruments, what you hear more in context of the mix is the lower fundamental harmonic of the snare. So it feels thicker than when it's solo. But that's why it's extremely important to fine-tune the EQ in context. So that's for the snare here. Let me see if I missed anything, but I think we're pretty much done. Oh, the toms. Yeah, let's see the toms. And no, I don't have a limiter right now. It would just add too much latency for the stream, and the level is low enough that I don't have any problems with distortion right now, so it's fine. So the toms. Okay, so why do I love this? I love this trick so much now, I just use it everywhere. So again, internal sidechain, which is listening to the highs. The highs are triggering expansion on the lows. A short attack, short release, adding a tiny bit more punch. It's almost too fast, but it still kind of shapes the lows in a bit of a bumpiness. So it makes each tom punch more individually. It works better when it's slower hits, but it still works like that, so it's fine. And then, yeah, flat EQ. Oh well. I'm surprised. I thought I EQ'd the toms. I guess I didn't. All right. You can hear how I showed the bass earlier, how I added the punch also with the same trick. You can hear how it makes the bass breathe. See? No trick, it's kind of flat. And when I turn on this click track, which is the external sidechain trigger, just hear how it breathes more. 。 it's just, yeah, it just adds that bumpiness, that kick element to it, which is great here. It's only triggering expansion on this. That's all it's doing. So that's very useful for, it's honestly, this technique is pretty much changing my life. It means you can create punch in any kind of muddy tom, muddy taiko. Like this is just huge. Like honestly, do this. You got like a muddy drum patch or whatever. Don't worry, you just, as long as it has sub, you put this technique, like you use this technique, you put some click track on every hit, you put a multiband, you make sure that you boost the lows on every hit, and you get punch out of basically any drum that is too flat or too boring by default, like a huge taiko ensemble, like maybe Strike Force. You got Strike Force, it's pretty wet, it's pretty muddy. Any patch that's too muddy, you just create punch like that. I love this. It's just so good for epic music. Like, because we got all these big drum libraries, and so many of them are just too muddy. And yeah, since I found this, it's like, oh my god. I was trying to create punch with compression, trying to use transient enhancers, but the transient enhancers didn't respond well because there's too much tails. It didn't respond well. It really wasn't working well. But the beauty of this trick is that you got the click at a defined spot. So the multiband compressor is gonna know exactly when to expand. So you're exactly gonna boost the kick at the right spot. That's why I love this so much. Okay. Oh, I need to show the stack choir. A bit of highs here, a bit less mid. And after that, just more controlling. So if it was like a more sparse arrangement, you would do less EQ. But since it's like a huge metal track and you want to hear the staccato through everything else, like it's kind of an aggressive choir, just the way I EQ the strings as well, same aggressive strings, not looking for the most organic sounds here. So yeah. And then reverb, of course, a bunch of reverb. Right. Okay. So now that you heard pretty much all the elements, I guess, let's actually listen to the track once more so you can kind of hear all the processing in every spot and what it does. So let's listen to the whole track again from start to finish. Oh, by the way, I got this on the master. Great. I realized I forgot to show a bunch of strings layer, actually just a few. So in the middle part, there is some build-ups here. Okay, so in the middle part, there is a stacked cello. Again, in the same spirit as the other strings, it's pretty processed, pretty mid-cut. I have low mids from a bunch of stuff already. Wait, my voice is a bit loud. I have a bunch of low mids from the basses and everything, so this is just for high texture mostly. So, yeah. And then there is a string build up here. So, yeah, it was kind of inconsistent. At the end, it became a bit too bright. So I wanted this to be a very airy layer, just under everything else, very consistent texture. So yeah, that's what you got here. It's really like under the rest, but it's adding a consistent airy texture. So yeah, that's that. Okay. I think that's everything. So as you can see, yeah, on a few things, I put some triggers. I wouldn't do this on every mix, but some mixes, you know, you have to add that extra definition. So we put some click tracks in there and you do some multi-band trickery. It's pretty nice. Yeah, and other than that, that's just what it is. Okay, so I will play the mix with no plugins on as requested. So you can hear how it sounds like with no plugins. It's kind of interesting, actually. So I'm just going to turn off everything. Fun times. I won't turn off the plugins on my voice, though. By the way, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. No, I can't select all the tracks and turn off the plugins. At least I don't think so. If it's possible, tell me, but that's one of the things with the FL. Yeah. There is some stuff you can't select. I can disable the plugins on the master, but wait, does that actually on the master, does that turn? No, I think it just turned off for the master. I think so. Wait. Yeah, see, it just it stays off on the other ones. So, wait. Nah, you can, yeah. Even if I select them, it's yeah. FL. There's a few things I don't like, but it's fine. Yeah. Okay, let's play without plugins. It's gonna be fun. No reverbs as well. No reverbs. Oh, that sounds bad. still the panning. There is still the panning. Oh my god, I can't take any more of this. Okay, so yeah, obviously the levels are completely wrong because hold on, yeah, the bass was like the levels are wrong because obviously there is some gain staging in the plugins kind of messing things up, so it's normal. Great, I'm just gonna manually turn all of them on again. It's fine because I don't usually just turn off all the plugins like that, so I'm tolerating this FL. I'm tolerating this. Just maybe in the next update, please. Yeah. Okay. So guys, I guess I'm gonna end the stream. I will play the track one more time with the plugins on, probably. And if you have any questions, this is the last chance to ask them. Because after that, I'm gonna end the stream. You know what? Actually, I just want to play the drums because I love the drums. I just want to play the drums. Let's see. It's just so much fun. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but... Hold on, let's see. See how wet it is? It is so wet. But the low end is dry. Like the low end is tight, that's what matters. But the rest is so wet. So like don't be afraid to crank the reverb on your mids and highs. Like if that's what the track needs, of course. Like if you're going for a dry kind of trailer hit, like a metallic precise hit, of course don't, but yeah. FL Studio, I don't prefer it. That's the first thing I started with like 5 years ago, and I'm just too lazy to check other things out, to be honest. And like I don't feel like there is a major issue right now which is slowing me down with FL. So once I get into like scoring, like mixing scores and stuff, I might have problems. I don't know, maybe like, yeah, like tempo maps is not done too well in FL and stuff, but it never really caused me massive issues with my work. So I'm not bothering with switching right now, but I could switch in the future. I think FL is fine either way when it comes to the quality of your mix. Like the plugins, everything, it has no influence whatsoever on the quality of everything. Sorry. And the delay compensation is very good right now with the 20 update. So the delay compensation, sidechaining, routing is very convenient. It's like pretty easy. I just sidechain like that, I click. It's all there visually. I like how it is for routing. It's very good for routing. Yeah, like you could even put like a control surface, and you could put several faders and like link these faders to groups. So you could basically have like VCA. It's called like VCA routing. You could have several faders controlling groups of instruments. Like routing wise, it's extremely powerful. So it's just a bit like some features which are lacking, in like maybe the tempo maps, audio editing, some stuff like that is not extremely amazing. I mean, in the mix track, I just kind of put the input so that it's not distorting the console, and also that sets a correct level for the next plugins. So I just kind of make sure it's not too loud. If it's like sitting at minus 25, minus 30, I don't really worry too much about that. Like I'm not, you know. But yeah, it kind of makes sure that no sound is above minus 18 dB RMS, which is around like 0 dB VU. So that's why I have a mix track. So first of all, the mix track sounds good, but also it's to make sure that I set the right level. So having that mix track kind of forces me to make the level good with the input volume. So then I know that whatever I put next is going to be at a good volume for analog plugins. So yeah, that's my thing. But then when it comes to like gain staging after that, I'm actually not that organized. Like I might just crank the gain at the end of an EQ just because I need more volume. So sometimes I kind of don't watch my gain staging too much, and I kind of end up with like a huge difference when I bypass the plugins. But hey, I mean, for the most part, it's fine. But at least I try to set the correct volume at the beginning, so it makes sure I don't run into like any big issues. I don't distort any plugin or something like that. Yeah, everything is possible with tweaking. But sometimes it's not just because of that. Like if you work with other studios, they might want you to have Pro Tools, so you can just take the Pro Tools session, and it's quicker for them compared to just exporting stems. But as I said, it's like it depends. Depends what you're doing, what you're required to do. We'll just always be open to switching, to learning new things, and it will be fine. Like at least in terms of like the quality of your work, don't feel limited by your DAW, because like it's all your ears pretty much. Like it's all your responsibility, all your ears, your plugins. But your DAW is not going to be an obstacle for that. To that. But yeah. So that's like the peace of mind, you know? Then it's just like the standard, what's used in the studios, what could maybe speed up your workflow. Like if I mix a movie, I might want to use Pro Tools because I got all the timings. It's kind of much better for a few reasons. But yeah, I'm fine with FL for now, so it's all good. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching, and I will end the stream now. But it was great fun, and I hope everything was interesting. And yeah, if you missed the stream, you will see it on my channel. It will take a few hours to render, but yeah, that's what it's gonna end up on my channel. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in another video then. Bye bye.